Yeah.
You have a echo otherwise.
Yeah.
Alright, to start things off, guys, welcome to the channel, to the Cappu Council Episode 1. Joined with me is a list of a lot of well-known guys in the Farius scene. Let me go by one and I'll start listing them off. We got Zaldinfox, one of the deck doctors himself. Lots of different crazy combos this man has come up with. Bomb slingers with Mistral Guides flying off and gifting and destroying things. After that, we've got Lou, just recently getting second place in the monthly cup, number 14, and a lot of high performances in tournaments, as well as, you know, I think you're number 1 and number 3 on ladder at the moment or something like that. Crazy high on ladder.
Yeah. I mean, it's early in the season, that doesn't represent too much, but yeah.
Yeah.
You got second place. I think you're doing pretty amazing.
After that, we've got ESofDawn, the only person to one-up Lou, getting first place in the monthly cup, number 14. And after that, we've got Superblizurd, another Farius streamer, much like Lou and myself, and
an excellent memer.
Yeah,
Well,
you were in the monthly cup too, right?
Exactly, but yeah, more of a memer, a connoisseur of the finer memes.
Yeah.
Faria.
Alright, so we're going to have a bunch of topics to go over. It's really awesome to have an open panel because I'm going to have some different opinions than I expect a lot of you guys are going to have. So it's nice to have that contrast. But okay, let's start from the top. Let me see if I can find the topics. So, where should we start? I guess we'll start at the top. Oversky. Are you guys a fan of how they released it in terms of it being islands one after the other, or are you more a fan of a different system where you can just buy the packs and get the cards, you don't have to play anything? Would you rather it be different? Yeah, sure, take it away.
Yeah, okay, so I think packs wouldn't have really worked with such a limited amount of cards. Like if you have only 30 cards or something, like how should packs work? You just buy like 10 or 15 packs and you pretty much have the majority of them, so I don't think packs was an option. One downside of the periodically release is that it takes away the hype from like being the expansion and everything is there. But it was also interesting to keep like those. It's maybe not bringing as many people back as it was, but it was very interesting for those that are very committed to Faria, just to have steady content coming up. So from that point, it's good. I would like to see maybe like smaller expansions, but more regular, and then everything at once. So like I would say every 4 months, 20 new cards, something like that. That's what I would prefer personally.
Alright, and then any of you guys want to weigh in?
I liked how the meta evolved in these little steps. Like every week we would get another pack of cards, and then we would theory craft and build the decks around them. And thematically, I don't know if you guys played these missions against AI, but I think they nailed it pretty good when they released the cards as a packet together with the islands, and that went along nicely thematically.
Yeah, maybe 2 things to weigh in there as well. The AI I thought was really well done.
So, most of the time.
Yeah, there's a couple of games where you're like, wait, Shar, what are you doing? You're not helping me at all.
What's even fun is the opponent's AI. I've recorded a video with Aqua for the final island today, and we were laughing our ass off sometimes at what they were doing. And like there was one turn, they were just waiting and doing nothing, and it was going for 15 seconds. And we were both like, why is he not doing anything? He's AI. He doesn't need to think. He should just be doing things.
What about from a deck building perspective, though? Zaldin, did you like that you had these like mini chapters to deck build and then weigh against what other people were deck building? Or would you have preferred all the cards at once?
You know, my experience is I prefer to have all the cards at once just because I like to be able to really mix and match which decks I'm exploring and experimenting with, meaning that I might get tired of working with Dreamkeeper for a while and I want to switch over to try some Skyak stuff. But that said, I think it's probably more important for the game that it was released in stages because it allows people, the whole community, to have access to at least one area, and it doesn't break the game open too quickly, and people don't get tired of deck building too quickly, which I think is a huge boon from a deck builder's perspective. Is you want to have fresh content to work with, and this kind of release plays to that. So although personally love to have it all, it's really better for the game, I think, if you release it from a deck building perspective, just one at a time.
All right, and then I'll pass this over to ESofDawn. Do you think that maybe the meta was a bit crazy because it was released in chapters? You know, we saw Frog Tosser originally was a monstrosity, but then it kind of got nerfed before we had a chance to see the other cards. Would you have preferred all at once so that, you know, maybe it wouldn't have been as OP originally?
You know, I kind of agree with Zaldinfox here. I think it's okay if the developers release it in stages, because the players have a lot of time to experiment with the cards. You know, if they release all of them at once, I don't know, it may be a little bit overwhelming to the players. And I really like the meta shift. Every week we had a different meta. It was really fun. It was a little bit chaotic, but it was fun.
Yeah. All right, I guess we can move on from that. What was your favorite island now, if anyone has a favorite? What was the best set of cards you got to start working with? Was it the Skyaks? Was it the Flash Salmons? Were you a fan of Dreamkeeper? Anyone with some preferences?
I need to look it up again, but I can give you the link if anyone else wants to.
I think my favorite card was the Flash Salmon, I gotta say. It's really nice addition for the Flyers line, because it's basically a Falcon Dive that scales off. It scales up to a Firebomb if you have 3 Sky Captains on the field, which is quite nice. So yeah, the yellow flying deck getting some love there. It also has some uses in sack variants or in Rush, but I liked it the most in Flyers, I'd say.
Yeah, I really look forward to Dreamkeeper and Gemshell. I mean, my heart goes out to blue almost all the time. I'm always trying to make blue great again in some new way, but those cards, I think, give so many interesting choices to a blue deck and to red as well. Unfortunately, we'll get to balance and or whether we think they're viable. I don't think they're really that amazing, but boy, they're a lot of fun to play with. So that was what I looked forward to.
I think the card I like most is the Manta Rider. It looks really underwhelming at first, but after a lot of testing, it's a really nice card. It's really strong.
Yeah, just to touch on that really quickly, I actually thought Manta Rider was going to be junk. I'm like, okay, it's a strong card, but it's 3 deserts, right? So it's like, who would go to 3 deserts with yellow? You have to double land to get your demons aggressive. You have to double land to make the charge lines for your chargers, your Colossus dash line. Like, you can't make a 3rd desert. I don't even like making the 3rd desert for Last Nightmare. But oh boy, is it ever strong.
Yeah, I mean, it's basically the strong effect of it is the mobility that Karim has, being able to charge 2 and have the flying effect. So you can just double collect between the worlds without lands, and it just synergizes so well with all the move a creature effects. So that's what makes the card. Also, the stats are insane. If you count it up, it's 7/5 stats for 5 Farrier. That's pretty good as well.
And overall, I enjoy the fact that they brought together sticky type minions, things like the Manta Rider that leave another body behind. The Swallow mechanic to some degree has that as well, although I haven't really got to experiment as much as I want on those. But I like that idea. That elevates the nature of the board. It makes it more important to keep that going. So Manta Rider, again, a really cool card. Kind of surprised me, actually, because I hadn't really looked at it very carefully. But yeah.
That actually makes me think of a new topic that we'll go over at some point. It's whether green should have these types of cards instead so that they can stay on the board, because they're the most vulnerable to removal. So maybe we can go a bit more into detail on that. Let me just go through the list. It'll probably be too long to go through each card and list them and then have us all weigh in. So maybe I'll just, send that over to you guys afterwards, and we'll all rate the cards, and I'll have a finale in the YouTube link, what our total scorings were. So that'll go afterwards. What did you want to touch on just quickly, Lou?
No, just your comment about green having these resilient creatures that come back. I think that would be a very good idea. Not only thematically, it would make sense that like green is the color where creatures grow again or come back again. But also, yeah, the downside, once you lose the board as green player, you almost never come back because you have no tempo plays other than like Widow Feed.
Alright, so I'm trying to think what would be better, if we go over the meta first or if we go over the tournament first. And what I mean by the tournament was there really more than 3 options? Was it just the yellow, the red, and the blue-green? Or was there more options than that for you guys? And, maybe a touch on like the Pantheon. Do you think it's a fault of the Pantheon that it was so restricted? Like, there's a lot we can go into here, so maybe we'll start off with Pantheon. Are you guys all a fan of Pantheon, or do you think it's time for it to be revamped just to make it so that these wild cards now can be used in multiple decks?
I think the Pantheon still provides a solid base, just in terms of how do we organize esports in this card game. Just because you want to avoid having one card being too good and being used in every deck. We had a time where Command almost saw play in every deck, and I really wouldn't want to have every deck use a certain card to the most degree possible. I think it adds more variety to deck building in the monthly cup.
Yeah, I agree with that. I feel like every format has its downside, but the Pantheon probably leads to the how should I say, the most competitive format. And also I think it's not that bad that some decks are similar. Like, it's more a problem that Faria only has 4 different colors. Let's say you had 5 colors, then you could make something like 2 hybrid decks and 1 monocolor deck. It's even possible. I was thinking of bringing 2 yellow decks to this, but yeah, it's not really that problematic to me that we see many monocolor lists and then maybe 1 dual color list. I feel like with every format, you would have like one lineup that's kind of obvious in the end.
All right, Zaldin, do you agree, disagree?
Yeah, I think I agree, but for a different reason. I think the card base is so small, relatively speaking, that there's not very much duplication of card effects quite yet. So, even if you look at Red's lineup for damage and removal, Fire Blast is just premier, right? There's nothing that it has all the tools you would need, and Cypher's Wrath has such a great niche. Once the card pool gets expanded more and more, I think Pantheon becomes even better as a format, because people can start to say, well, I need removal, but I don't quite need as strong removal, and therefore they can choose different options, that sort of thing. I think the guys have made the point very, very well. What are you going to do? You're going to choose a different format and then break the game in some other way, and people will be like, I don't want to watch green on green or whatever it is. So,
Yeah, and then lastly, ESofDawn, do you just want to agree with that, or do you have a different site?
Yeah, I have to agree with that. It's just the best option right now. We don't want to see like 3 flowers in every deck, and yeah, basically that's the best option. It's not perfect, but I think it's the best option.
All right, so let's transition from that, the flower topic, straight into the balance. Now, for anyone that's returning to the game or hasn't played it in a while, there was a bunch of nerfs from the core set that happened leading through the Oversky Islands. It was Libraries, now a 5 lake card. I have a couple of them wrote down. Aviary is now only +2 attack, and it's a 2 fairy. Sorry, only +1 attack, and it's a 2 fairy card. And then Wishes. I mean, they gutted Wishes. I actually don't even recall what it is now. It's discount by 1, and it's still 3 cost. Yeah. So, I mean, Library was insane. Do you guys just all agree that it needed a nerf, or were some of you kind of thinking it needed to be that broken to keep blue in the game?
I think it still needs a change, to be honest. Like, the design of the card is just horrible. Your life doesn't matter, and if you run Radiant, it's even an advantage to go low on life. So you play the library and you play with an advantage of 1 card and 2 Pharaoh each turn. Like, you don't even need to make the right plays to win the board by just such a huge advantage. I don't like the card. I think it's way out of scale. If anything, I would change it to gain only 1 Farrier, and I think it would still be decent. I mean, the 5 lake change definitely helped, so it's slower, but if people run water elementals, like one thing that happened to me in the qualifier for the monthly cup, I lost to a turn 3. Is it still possible? You had water elemental, explore, then another water elemental. I think it was a turn 3 library. That's what I lost to.
It used to be possible. It used to be possible turn 2 when you had the Explorer. It was Explore Water Alley, next turn Water Alley Library. It was like, how do you beat that? Let me pass this over to ESofDawn. Do you think Library is still an issue? Do you think it needed to be nerfed? Should it get another nerf potentially?
It was insane at 4 lakes. I wasn't in the game at the time that it was 2 lakes, so I can't really compare, but it sounds pretty insane. At 4 lakes, it's really easy to get to the library with just a single water elemental, and it's just so impactful. The fact that it gives you cards and the Feria. Maybe if you cut like the Feria to 1 instead of 2, maybe it's an option to balance the card. At 5 cards, it's still good. Yeah, just about it.
Yeah, I feel like the card draw is not so much a problem, because like, what you do if your hand is full of cards and you can't play them, it's whatever. But if you gain Farrier is so snowbally that whoever has more Farrier and can use that to dominate the board, it gets in a much better spot. And also, what's the point of having Gabriel and Cistern in the game, which basically is there to ramp for Farrier, but is much worse. So Library should be more, if anything, a draw tool if you want that, but having it like the best Farrier production that you can get is just, I don't know.
The best collector in the game.
Yeah, and you can't even remove it efficiently.
If you compare it to Cistern only gets value after like 2 turns, staying 2 turns on board, and then Library only has to stay 1 turn on board, and like all the removal isn't even that efficient. Even if you let's say have an Emperor's Command, that's still a 1 Farrier loss for you to deal with the Library. So yeah, maybe the answer is not all there in terms of cost. But that said, I mean, Cistern is a 2-lake card. It's kind of a bit of a gap to compare it, because by 5 lakes, it's a bit more likely they're at your board. But Zaldin, from a deck building perspective, was it more fun now that Wishes is nerfed that not all decks are running Wishes, or do you think you liked Wishes and getting tons of decks? Actually, he's, I guess, having to take a quick break. Probably something important came up. But all right, so I'll pass it over to you guys then. Wishes now, was it more or less interesting now that it's nerfed? Because I think most of us will agree it wasn't broken, but it was pretty strong. Is it better to be nerfed, or did you guys like it?
I think that Lou had a video that he played runing into feed, like like the best turn in Feria or something like that, right? So that's kind of shows you all you need to know about Wishes. You know, at this point, it's not really playable. I don't think it's not competitive. It maybe is a fun deck, but it's not really viable in a competitive scene.
Yeah, now that you're back, Zaldin, the question was to you. Do you like the deck building with wishes, or are you happy that it's gone now? Was it more or less options?
I think it's probably better for the game. I feel like I wish that wishes were more viable, but not overpowered. I've been doing a lot of work with Keeper and Wishes, trying to bring it back to some sort of parity. But I think, as ES said, it's out of any contention. We don't really want this card to be a competitive card because we want the design of the game to go forward and allow more option. I think it's actually at a good spot, and I think if, say, you have 100 more cards down the road, 3 Wishes will get another look. I guarantee you that. So I think it's a good change.
All right.
Yeah, I think the main reason why it got changed wasn't that it was like OP, but it was just from a design perspective. It was an auto inclusion in every multicolor deck, and it actually turned duo or triple color decks into wish decks, simply because the gap was so close to get these 2 extra lands. And now we'll see some triple color decks, much more dual color decks. So it definitely helped to improve the variety of deck building.
Mm-hmm.
All right, and Aviary, is it the same thing? Is this a nice preemptive nerf for the Nats? Now that there's Balloonfish, now that there's Flash Time, are you guys happy with the Aviary nerf, or are you kind of wishing something else was changed instead?
I kind of like the design of Aviary, and I also like to play Nets a bit, but that obviously isn't possible anymore because yeah.
I saw Zaldin shaking his head. I'm guessing you would have preferred a Nat nerf rather than the Aviary?
Yeah, actually, they're both fine in my opinion.
Oh, okay.
I mean, Nats is really a strong deck, but Aviary maybe tuned it a little bit down. But yeah, I agree with Lizard. I mean, what are you gonna do? Drop a +1 damage? I don't know. It's just it's just.
I'm happy that Nets is not like on the top tier anymore, because it's, from a competitive point of view, it's kind of a little bit too RNG dependent.
But can I push back on that with a question? When you see Nats as a competitor, when you're watching the game, I find it really exciting because you're watching a guy trying to control his own life, and then the other guy is trying to. It gives a dynamic that's really interesting to me from a viewer's perspective.
It's very unique. Yeah, that's true. It's like many decks in Pharaoh have this, what you mentioned, this rather unique situation that doesn't happen if you play other decks. So yeah, where summons the net, can you maybe play net ping pong and get the lever that way? You have to move them back, but it can be frustrating if you just lose some coin flips and stuff. So
yeah, that's understandable. But I like the general idea of having a global buff. Buffing all your flying creatures is something very unique to the game, and I'm kind of sad that it's now so far away from being viable again.
All right, I want to pass this off. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
All right, I want to pass this off to ESofDawn now. With Aviary and Nats in the discussion, did you like that these cards got toned back a little bit, or are you in favor of what Zaldin's saying, where it brought this dynamic where it was fun to play? But some people would say, wasn't it more of a pain because you never wanted to kill their Nats? It always felt like if you hit their Nats, you were losing the game, and so you tried to hide, and then you just eventually lost? Or do you like that, and you kind of wish it was still the same power level?
I'm just a little bit sad because I really like to play Nats. Just a fun deck, but at the same time, I kind of understand the nerf. With all the other flight cards we have Flight of the Mantas, we have the Skyax, we have just the Manta Rider and the Fish Salmon. It just would have been OP, and the pre-nerf is really smart from the developer side. I think it's good for the game.
Yeah, Salmon would probably be the most OP thing with Aviaries, I think.
One fairy, deal 3 damage.
Yeah. Seems decent.
Was there any other cards I missed, or is it just those 3 that were nerfed of the original set? Now, we know that Frog Tosser and Whale were nerfed, but that was of Oversky.
No, I think that's it.
Okay. Now, some cards that weren't nerfed, that everyone was expecting to be nerfed, going into Oversky was Runin. Are you guys thinking that maybe it was a misstep that people didn't bring green to the tournament just because you expect everyone to be playing yellow, you expect everyone to be playing red? We may have actually seen green in the tournament if people made that call, and then we'd see more Runin doing the constant death after death after death. Do you guys think this is a card that should have been nerfed?
I mean, it's frustrating to play against if you don't have an answer to deal with, but now with the introduction of Swallow, technically every deck can have an answer, so it's not as much of a problem anymore as it was before. Like before, Red used to struggle against Runin and was basically just an auto-lose.
Yeah.
Granted, though, you could have outmaneuvered Judge to the other side, but there's only so much you can do to play around Runin.
Yeah, so one problem I have with cards like Runin is the scaling. So Runin gets 2/2 every time it returns. And why not make it that it quickly leads to Runin being huge so that you can't deal with it? We had the same problem with Serious Crusader. It also used to gain 2/2 each turn when you hit face. No, it gains 2/2 each time you hit face. But they could have just made Runin that it only gains 1/1. Maybe increase the base stats a little bit to compensate. Let's say a 5/5, and it gains 1/1 each time it dies. That's like what I think would be the best way to deal with Runin. And the question about bringing green to the monthly cup lineup, I've considered it for a long time, but the most important card in this meta for green is probably Horsemaster, and you really need Horsemaster in red combat as well, and I thought red combat was stronger overall. So yeah, if I could have used the Horsemaster in green, I would have really considered that, because you can get good trades with World Run forces to kill an elemental and basically win the game of that. And it's also a good matchup against mono red. But yeah, because of no Horsemaster, I didn't end up with mono green.
Yeah, that's a good point about the Horsemaster. Now, taking this back to Runin, though, is there anyone here who thinks Runin needs to be nerfed?
I don't think so. I actually seen a green deck with Runin in the monthly cup when I played Alvar. That was really interesting. I think
He
it's
got
not
rank
that
1 on ladder with that.
really
He
with
was the first
mono
board
green.
rank this season, yeah.
Yeah.
He was
That's
first board
interesting.
rank. Yeah.
With all the swallow around, that's
Yeah, yeah.
okay.
He climbed super fast. Like when I was starting after the reset, and when I was like rank 6 or something, he was rank 2 already. He was almost undefeated.
Yeah.
Wow.
I guess he farmed all the rush players though with taunts.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, not only do you counter the rush players, but as well, like, people talk about Shifting Octopus as being broken because you can have a 5/5 for 4, and then it's like, well, Grove Guardian's a 5/6 for 5 with taunt, right? So it's not much much weaker.
Some people say in chat that we forgot about the well nerf.
Yeah, that's from the.
We haven't got to that part yet.
Yeah, it's of Oversky.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so I've managed to create this awesome transition now, and I've kind of baited it this way. You guys mentioned how now there's this universal answer in Flower towards the Runin. Now, do you guys think Flower is overpowered? Now, I've set this up nicely because it's like Runin's kind of the answer, and this is the point I wanted to make, was that with Flower in the game, it stops a lot of the cheese mechanics, right? You can swallow Runin. You can swallow a Disciple that's about to OTK you. You can swallow, if someone all-in triple Gift of Steals a Braden, you can swallow it. It stops a lot of these cheese mechanics where people just all-in, and it gives you this ability to have an answer. Now the question to you guys is it just too strong, or do you think that maybe it needs to be higher land requirement? Do you think it's fine? Let's go through this one by one. I guess we'll start with Zaldin. What do you think about Flower?
Yeah, I like Flower in general, but I think as with all the things I've talked about over the years with Feria, it needs to elevate and magnify the importance of board presence and board positioning. in my opinion, that's the way I think the game should go to make a really interesting and competitive game. We've seen this with Hellfire, Crackthorn, those kinds of things. I think Flower's in a similar situation. You want a card that's going to cost someone some sort of position on the board, and if it had that, I think it would be in a really good spot. Yeah.
All right, and then Lou.
Yeah, I can only agree with that part. Like in general, like Farrier needs to go or stick to the direction of going more for the importance of the board. What I don't like about Flower is that it's usually when it's good in tempo decks or in aggressive decks. I think it's very unfair because it's the best tempo removal you have in the game. And what the nerf that they did to Flower, so it triggers at the end of your turn now instead of the start. So your opponent actually gets to move and attack with the creature once it's released. That's a really good one because that gives the initiation to the owner of the swallowed creature. And I want to have it as well in a way that when you break the flower on yourself, that you can also move the creature. So let's say your opponent swallows your creature, you use a firebomb to destroy it, and then you can move your creature and attack. So he actually gets punished for putting the flower in front of his orb. So you don't lose one turn of attack, because then it actually pays off to use removal on. Because right now, at best, you're trading even if you flame bursted, and flame burst is only a red card, and also you lose one turn of the creature. So it's once again having the answer is not really worth it even.
All right, and then ESofDawn, your thoughts on Flower, and then do you agree with Blue that it would be really cool if freeing the creature meant it could move again?
Yeah, I can agree with Lou on that. I have a lot to say about Flower. I really, I don't like the card. To be honest, I think the design that they were going for, the idea is nice, but okay. So the issues I have with Flower is basically the cost. For one, being able to draw into such an impactful board swallow, yeah, removal is such a huge impact on the board. From zero failure, you can double draw for that if you're at zero failure. Another problem is some people starting running it over Frogify. I mean, if that happens, you know something is wrong. Another issue that sometimes even if you can clear the flower instantly with, like, say, a firebomb, it's not always worth it, because the creature can't move, and if you do that, they can just trade into it, and that's just bad. And I think it would be nice if the flower would be 4 cost. That might solve a lot of problem. And just another issue is that the flower is multicolor. I mean, it doesn't have any color, and that takes away a little bit from the uniqueness of the colors. I mean, you can see that in mono red we have AoE in the for example, and just that allows to take away from that a little bit.
Can I answer to that?
Sure.
So,
yeah.
So for the part that it's multicolor, that's actually something the community has been asking a lot, to have neutral or removal that every faction has access to. But like you mentioned, it shouldn't be better than a Frogify. So yeah, the power level of Flower is probably too good. If there's a single target answer that's accessible to all colors, it has to be weaker than the other options. The strength of Flower depends a lot on the matchup. So let's say you play against yellow player, then Flower won't be as good because they have movement tricks like just the 0-cost Flash Wind and they double collect and hit into the Flower, and you almost spend 3 Farrier for nothing. Whereas if you play against a mono green deck and they only drop 1 Whirlwind Force and you swallow that, it's basically almost GG because they lose so much tempo. So yeah, it's nice to have a card like Flower. It's just a bit too good right now, especially in the right matchups. And I wanted to say something else, but I forgot it.
All right, let's pass it over to the.
Can I add something real quick?
Yeah.
Just the fact that it just rush decks aside from yellow rush. Like say you play green rush or red rush. If the opponent gets a flower, all your investments, all the buffs that you put into the say Zaldinfox is gone, and the opponent has enough time to recover.
Yeah. All right, let's pass it over to the master of memes then, Superblizurd. Do you like it? Does it satisfy the memes, or is it not there?
Personally, it, like as mentioned, it breaks up color identity. That's the main issue with it. You can like it or you can not like it. It's up to you how you want to view that. But it's breaking up the balance, that's for sure, because up till this point, green and red had no removal. That also brings along a change of playstyles, because against red you were able to all-in buff your creature if you were green, or say, it really makes you play around Flower in basically every deck. They don't even have to play Flower, but just the existence of Flower as a card makes it super hard and influences your playstyle in such a big way. I don't know if that's the main problem for me.
Yeah.
I feel like
the fact that there's no counterplay is a problem.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's why I meant if you can really punish people if they just swallow a ground shaker in front of your orb, if you can flame burst it and then hit him for 5 in the face and probably win the race. Or I don't know if it's the best option, but I think Flower should get a change. Yeah.
All right, so let's not take too long with Flower because there's a bunch of other cards we need to get into as well. I think the general opinion of the floor then is Flower. We understand what it was trying to do, but we just don't like that. It doesn't really fit the color identities. You know, maybe this is something that would have worked better in green because green didn't have access to anything like this, but in multicolor it just defines the meta too much because you have to play around it, like you guys were mentioning. So let's jump into one of the next cards that's hugely up for discussion is Skywhale. Now, Skywhale came out originally as a 6/8 charge 3 that could collect Faria. Now it is 8 lands, so you have to keep in mind that when this card came out, the previous meta in the monthly cup was everyone was playing red combat, everyone was playing yellow tempo. Those are decks that were still very strong even against Skywhale because you could get the early pressure. And if you had, Axe Grinders and Bradians aggressive early on, you could just close out a game around turn 4, turn 5. So Skywhale had to come out as something strong, but with addition to Frog Tosser, with addition to a lot of the other cards, it just ended up in this area where there's so many reward cards that we saw blue-green ramp with Wild Growth. Wild Growth got nerfed. Right, I forgot about that one, but yeah, Wild Growth got nerfed. And now it's a 6/6 cannot gather, so Skywhale completely nerfed from that state. Let's go through this one by one really fast. Zaldin, what do you think? Was it over nerfed now? Was it something else that should have been changed? Do you like Skywhale?
Yeah, I think very briefly, from a design perspective, it was almost impossible for them to prepare this card for release in a way that wouldn't get it nerfed. It's just the nature of the design, as you said, the nature of tempo in the game. It was just like a train hitting a wall. But I think that said, I still use it, and I'm planning in the next few weeks to see if I can carve out some more space for it. I think people will shy away from it over the next week and a half, but I still think I think it's in a good spot.
Yeah, it's in a good spot right now. At first, I was a bit more cautious with, like, I was saying maybe remove the harvesting or remove 2 health, they ended with both, and it's in a really good spot right now. It's still useful to close out games in blue-green land ramp decks because you need the finishing potential. Only playing elementals and frog tossers won't close out games. So if you're in a spot where you have the board, have creatures to harvest, and then swallow one creature and close out the game, it's fine. In the past, it used to be so with the double collecting, you have 6 Pharaoh, you swallow the enemy creature, and they play another one, and then you can double collect +1, play another whale or Aurora's Creation, and you have 2 whales on board that double collect or collect everywhere. So yeah, not being able to collect is a very good change that I like a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I like the change as well. There's just one problem I have with wildlands in general, and we saw it with the power level of whale. As long as whale was that dominant as it was in the pre-nerf phase, there was basically no other deck that could play whale except the blue and green ramp. Because as long as ramp is the best archetype to, I don't even want to call it an archetype because it's just spamming special lands. Really, there's there doesn't go much play into it. Well, yeah, it takes skill to left click the fields. No, but as long as this archetype as a deck type exists, whale won't be played in any other deck. I don't think. At least it was back in the day when
I lost
whale
in
its
the
power level.
Garodon tournament today to a blue-red whale deck.
Okay.
But that's because he got the turn 3 or turn 4 library.
That's awesome.
So,
Yeah.
Alright, and S, what's your thoughts on Skywell?
I think it's in a really good place right now too. Just before it was so insane because of the creation and the collection, and just the date life. I mean, it's really hard to deal with. But right now it dies to ground checker. Like it can trade into it, and it's really easy to kill the whale. And just back then, if you just drop a whale, it was just game over. And now it's fine. It's still being playable. I even brought some whales to the monthly cup. Yeah, it's good.
I guess it didn't really get touched on though. You guys mentioned you were happy with the current level of it, but do you guys like the card in general? Is it a card you like, or is it not satisfying what you would hope an 8-land card would do?
I had one really fun game in the monthly cup. I think it was against Ranma, and like it was basically hunt down the whale, and he was trying to outmaneuver the whale because I had this swallowed big creature inside, and was trying to follow him with my red creatures without horse masters and trying to circle him in. So I don't know. I think the card is kind of fun. Also to play against. I would have lost that game if he had another one, but I was a little bit lucky. So yeah, I think it's fine design wise, and I think for 8 lands, if it was easier for other colors to get to the 8 lands, it would maybe be a bit better. But yeah.
Are you guys happy to leave it with there? Alright, so let's go to the next card. I think, I'm kind of going down a priority list of what people have most complained about, at least for discussion, and so I guess Frog Tosser has to be number 3 then. Frog Tosser coming out as a 4/6 originally, and was then nerfed down to a 4/4 body. It was killing those blue jump Triton Warriors and surviving, and so blue jump was instantly killed off. And then a lot of people thought like chargers and like macemen, like demons were getting killed off, so Yell Rush didn't even feel that strong. I guess it makes sense that they nerfed it in that regard, just because there was too many reward cards and it was just too punishing to a lot of decks. At 4/4 now, do you guys like the card, or in this blue-green archetype that we're seeing, do you think it's just too easy for the blue-green deck to play? Like you play your elementals, you play your Earthcraft, you find your Willow Feeds, then Frog Tosser is just a map-wide clear. Is this a card that's good for the game, or do you think it should be nerfed just so that it's a tier 2 card rather than being a tier 1 in the blue-green?
I don't like the stats on it. 4 damage, global removal, that's a lot. That makes all of the 4 HP creatures still a lot less viable, and I would have rather liked a stat line like 3-5 or something. That would be a lot nicer, because you still get the body that survives. Like, you get a 5 HP creature and it can survive most things, but it wouldn't be as oppressive as it is now. I think Stalker is in a good spot, but I still think Frog Tosser could be redistributed stat-wise, and it also would encourage more of the hand buff strategy. Like, let's say we play Tiki Totems to buff our Stalkers and our Frog Tossers. That we haven't seen any Tiki Totems being played, or
Return of the Beastmaster.
Yeah, or even Beastmasters, for example. I think that would be a good change, just because 4 damage is so oppressive globally.
Yeah, the 4 damage, like you said, it's kind of a meta shaping card, similar to Ground Shaker, that restricts all the 1 health creatures. The 4 attack counters all the 4 health minions with low attack, like a Charger, like a Windstorm Charger, like a Bloodsinger. All these kind of cards now are not really playable, because it's such a huge tempo swing. If you can toss the frog, kill the guy, and your guy survives, so it feels really bad to play against these kind of decks. One thing that I like, because there's some decision making involved, is blocking the spot where the frog summons. So just an example, today in the tournament that I casted, there was a 2/2 on board, and it could have been frog tossed, but he played the library behind the 2/2, so there was no room for the frog to summon. So that's what I like. But being kind of this global remover again, that's hard to play around. Yeah, I also wouldn't mind maybe a nerf or a stat change to 3 attack only.
Alright, and then let's jump to Zaldin. You fan of it? Not a fan of it? Do you want it to require more card combos like the Beastmaster? Or do you like the level it's at?
I think it's better, but I think it'd be neat to pull in some other cards. So yeah, I agree with what the guys have said.
Alright, S, what do you think?
I kind of agree, but I mean, I just think that it's really hard, just like Lou said, it's really hard to play around, and the 4 health creatures are just gonna suffer from it. I think that like before it was changed, I thought that they would change it to a 3/5, so it has synergy with the Beastmaster and Tiki Totem and all that. I don't know. Maybe it would have been less oppressive than that, because the 3 damage is not that oppressive. So yeah, but now it's still a good card. We need to think about if they're gonna nerf the card. Is blue green gonna leave the meta, or?
Yeah, that would be a thought. Would it kill off blue green if they touch Frog Tosser? Because if suddenly you have to start running these Beastmasters, like Beastmaster hasn't been run for a good reason, it's because it's not really up there in the power levels, so suddenly if you have to be playing Beastmaster to get Frog Tosser value, maybe blue green just dies off. And maybe it's nice if we just transition quickly to what do we think the meta currently is, because then we can break down some of these cards and figure out like what levels they should be at least from our perspectives. So looking at the monthly cup, I think the number 1 deck in everyone's lineup was like Red Combat. That was just there for almost everyone. Some people brought Red Rush, but it was almost exclusively Red Combat. We saw Yellow Tempo up there, Yellow Rush up there, and then Blue Green, right, with the 2 different variations. It was the one that was super land ramp for the library tree, and then those ones with buffs and they were running Skywell. Do you guys think there's basically those 4 or 5 decks that are just top tier and nothing else really competes with it, or is there a lot of options? Is there any decks that's missing, or do you think there's some decks that are too strong at the moment?
Blue Jump is maybe a bit underrated. Like someone mentioned earlier, after the Frog Tosser was 4/6 and survived the trades, like everybody just stopped playing Blue Jump, and now you might not want to run Water Elementals in your Blue Jump list anymore to have a weakness against blue-green Frog Toss decks. But if you just put in like the 4/4s like Archons, then you run Mystic Beasts, Can maybe even think of Prophet of Tides, so you get to the Mystic Beast spot faster. I built a fun deck. You can splash in also the Tau ship for 1 desert, and you can run flowers. That's a deck that does fairly well against elementals and blue-green. But yeah, blue a list that's underrated. I think green is also decent if you play with triple horse master, because you want to take the trades earlier, so you don't run into flower if you have your big creatures sit on board. Red yellow combat is kind of weak to flower as well, because often you want to, like, you have often like only one creature on board that you buff with a gift and then give it flying, so that gets kind of pretty hard countered by flowers. Other than that, not sure if you're missing anything. I know you're a big fan of only neutral, mono neutral decks, so that can often catch people off guard. But yeah.
It's one of those weird things where the perceived meta by the community is very different from what the actual meta is. I think the MC really showed us that. And I think there's a lot of players who were hiding, or not hiding in a bad way, but holding back on the lists that they were bringing. And maybe people expected like tree everywhere and crazy whale decks all over the place. And perhaps that they were just like, oh, I don't understand. Why is it just the same basic meta that we had before with Manta Rider in it? And I think that goes to show you that ladder really does not reflect maybe the more competitive side of some of the decks. I think there's some contenders that are coming up, but we're still early. And but yeah, I think people were maybe caught off guard. Like, oh.
Yeah, that's a great point to bring up. And yeah, there is the gray area. I know with the most recent island, like there's still some testing to be done with blue-yellow, tow ship, and like the Dreamkeeper stuff. I'm sure as more testing happens, we might see some secret decks come out. But passing this over to ESofDawn, do you think there's any decks that maybe we're missing that are up there at the moment, or do you think that just a couple of these are really the top tier?
So as far as decks that are not really competitive at the moment, I think Sack is a little bit underwhelming right now. Yeah, even though that I think that some people can make it work in the future. Also, the new blue-green, blue-red, the new blue-red bargain seemed a little bit strong, but after some testing and stuff, I didn't find it that competitive.
I agree with that 100%, by the way. Yeah.
Yeah, the Gem Shell Tortoise is insane value. That card is really strong. Like before that, you had no real reason to go blue-red other than you want some AoE clear and some Farrier ramp, but now you actually have a card where it pays off to build for this land, because like there was no reason to build a deck around Ice Rock Behemoth.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
wait, you don't like an 8/8 with protection and con?
What is protection still in this game?
Oh man, I mean, and Yellow Tempo is once again one of the strongest deck in the meta. It's not surprising with the Manta Rider.
Yeah, but why do you think is it Yellow Tempo that like always makes it way back? Like it has to be more the other
I think
cards
just
than Manta Rider.
yeah, I think just all of the movement, all of the options, and just the cheap creatures. You basically with Yellow Tempo, you basically just need to keep collecting and clear the board, and you're good to go.
Yeah, it's like the best example for a tempo deck for a reason. You almost always get to collect from wells thanks to movement tricks, and you have the most efficient removal with cards like Wind Soldier. Then Soul Rain 2 damage removal for 2 is also good. And yeah, it's gotten a bit away more from the event synergy now with Manta Rider. But yeah, like you said, the removal and the efficiency, I think as well is what just, no matter what happens to the meta and what cards get added, yellow will always, like, because of the base set of removers, will always have the edge in that regard.
Yeah, it's such a strong color, and especially when new cards come out, people often go to the safe deck that is Yellow Tempo.
Yeah. It's kind of weird though. We had this combo, like the Training Flashwind in particular. We had this combo for ages, and only recently people started playing it in combination in Yellow Tempo, and it picked up in popularity. But I mean, the cards were there. It's just no one really played them, or maybe
I think
realized
the real
potential.
revelation for people was when Demon got Kaleem's training. Whichever idiot first did that wrecked the rest of the game for us, because it just is so good.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it goes back to this nature of, you can, like they said, you can collect every time. You can always collect with yellow. It's just brutal. Like the guy's like, no, I got him now. He's not gonna get a well. Oh, he's soul drain. Boom. And you're like, oh.
When Soldier Quadra collect with 2 flash runs, it's like, what the heck's going on?
People are doing loopy loops around the map. Anyways, but yeah.
Yeah, a couple of players a bit stubborn, not realizing that training was as good. For so long, I didn't play training because I thought it wasn't viable. Oh man, shaking my head at myself.
I've always read it as one-off to surprise people, but
okay, so I think we have a general consensus then. It's like the monthly cup decks are what we think were top, but there's maybe a gray area for blue jump's pretty strong. Blue yellow is going to get more testing. Blue red's going to get more testing, but blue red probably a bit too weak. So with that consensus then, let's shift over to the other side of the cards that are maybe in discussion. Is the flower, the chieftain, is red, yellow, or even with Path to Paradise, are these rush decks good, bad? Do you want them increased in power, or what's your guys' thought on this? Because we used to have green, yellow, rush, and it was an OTK deck. You just hit face, feed, hit face again. And they kind of brought it back with Path to Paradise and Chieftain.
Can I start with that?
Sure, let's pass this over to Lou.
So the problem of all these decks, like especially with green yellow, was back when Doomsday was 4 Farah cost, you just had the most cheesiest board clear ever for super cheap. So no matter what defense you put up with, they could just Doomsday clear. Now it's in a similar way back with the best single target removal being Flower, that just fits well in the stack because you have the lands for it. So let's say they just put up like 2 towns next to up, you just double Flower and their defense is pointless. They don't have to fight through the cards, they can just start hitting your face. So yeah, I feel like if there was no Flower in these kind of decks, it would be a bit much fairer to play against them. But Flower just removing towns out of nowhere is super cheesy.
It's not even the taunts. Like, you can remove collectors as well. Like, for example, in my game against Senalian, where I played in the qualifier, I was playing Yellow Rush and he dropped a Brigand, and then I used a Flower to capture the Brigand, and that basically just won me the game because he couldn't get the combat value, and it just denies so much.
All right, and then ESofDawn, do you agree with that point that it's more Flower that's the issue, and you're okay with the Path to Rush deck outside of Flower, or do you think that, you know, with Path to Paradise and Chieftain, this poke deck isn't really, or should get nerfed?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think that it's that strong at the moment. There's actually a list by Kick Dance, I believe, that was kinda of a red, yellow rush.
Super hard burn, yeah.
Yeah, like super hard burn, which is I tried it on ladder. It was really fun to play. Unfortunately, it falls down when you don't have the acceleration to get to the opponent's orb. So that's so if you want it to be viable, you need to include the Path to Paradise or Elementals, and then it just becomes a little bit slower, a little bit better, but weaker overall. So I don't think Path to Paradise needs a nerf.
Okay. And then, did you already touch on this, Zaldin?
No, but I basically agree. One note, though, if you make Flower an adjacent type of effect, it will simultaneously deal with any acceleration of power to these kinds of decks, because they're rushing for your face. Flower's good on the defensive side. It's when you can grab collectors, as Lizard was saying, and stuff across the board. So Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. It actually reminds me, jumping into the King Dance list with like the red, yellow, rush. Blue and I used to, for fun, every once in a while, just play Yellow Burn, where we just double land, drop a Templar, and then training it to hit face for 7, and then play like Malevolent Spirits and Rebel Slingers, and it was sort of like a cheesy poke deck, sort of like the Path to Rush, but it doesn't have access to the flower thing, so it's weird, because I actually kind of like the Yellow Burn deck, but the Path to Rush deck I don't like, so maybe it's more the flower that I'm having an issue with, actually.
Yeah, it's such an insane card. I mean, with the burn list of King Dance, you can just sit back and wait for your combos. And when you have flower, you can just flower the creatures that protect in the orb and just go with like a follower and double or triple gift of steel and win. So
All right, and then I think
yeah.
the next up card on that list of the most complained about would be wait, I just had it in mind and then I forgot. Skyak. So Skyak's a really cool card. I think a lot of people like it, but then I listen to some streamers and they're like, how could the devs make this? You get like 10 bodies. It's like, what? How is this fair? 3 fairy like 12 bodies or
Such
something?
a meme card.
Yeah. Do you guys?
It feels so good to play Skyak against yellow tempo and have like 6 or 7 bodies on board and they can't deal with it.
All right, so I'm going to quickly weigh in and just say I'm a fan of this card. I love the level it's at, and I like this. So, is there anyone that wants to weigh in and say they don't like it, or do you guys also like it? Let's just open this up.
What I like about this is that it actually offers counterplay in a way that you don't want to kill the Skyak all the time. So often when I play against Skyaks, I just swallow the Skyak right away so he can't play others. And yeah, it's pretty strong with the scaling, but like not too strong, I would say, and it enables some fun combos with Gift of Rakor. That's what I like the most about it.
I think
Have
it
you
can
guys,
be.
oh,
Yeah.
sorry.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
Just want to say that I think it can be sometimes broken with creation.
Yeah.
You can just fill the entire board.
First thing I tried,
Yeah, and
That's
hunt
the first thing I tried.
and yeah, and you have to look for the specific yak.
Yeah, oh my
which is
god.
kind of funny.
It's so stupid. It's so stupid.
But yeah, it just
Possible
dies
game.
to all of them just die to Firestorm. So there's a counterplay and yeah.
What you're saying is we need a multicolor AoE spell so every deck can deal with it.
Oh god,
Correct.
please no.
Doomsday stuff.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, it's a problem for everything that's not red. Yeah.
One point I want to touch on is the adjacency mechanic. I like it, but when you compare the Skyak to the Kalim Skyguard, it's just so much better.
Yep.
So maybe I wouldn't call for a nerf on the Skyak, but for a buff on the Skyguard instead. Maybe just a little love tap to have that card, because I really like it.
Or something.
I mean,
Yeah, for
Skyak
example.
forces you to go green as well. I think Skyguard can still be worth it for yellow decks.
Yeah, I've actually used to play Skyguard in my tempo decks just because it was like just outside of playable. I thought I actually find it to be a pretty strong card already.
I mean, it's just a free health. You don't want free health creatures in your deck are just a weakness, so that's the only downside.
Yeah, especially with Salmon now too. I think we'll see a couple of people try it in Rush. You know, we've seen Hunted Outlaws. I think it's only a matter of time before we see Skyguard, because now you don't need Wingate to get on the enemy land. You just salmon across, and then you play the Skyguard, and then you hit face activate your prayer, and you're on their land now. So I think Skyguard maybe doesn't need to be nerfed. At least my opinion. It seems pretty strong.
I don't know, like maybe a little quality of life buff, like Zeldin mentioned, the dash would be nice, or
dash, yeah.
Maybe a little stat adjustment, just because the Skyak feels so much better than the Skyguard at this point.
I mean, it is a guard, right?
So it fills a similar role. Let's be honest, because with the adjacency mechanic, the summon adjacent, there are only these 2 cards in the game right now.
But I think stat-wise it's in a decent spot, because if you made it a 4/4/4 Farrier, that would be like on the level of a Maceman or a Triton warrior. But the adjacency, what's it called, effect often means that you can harvest one additional farrier because you can play him at the well. So yeah, it's pretty difficult. Like I think if you give him just one more stat, it would be close to like almost tier 1.
Chad actually beating me to it. I was just gonna mention that Twin Soul's the third card. Gotta put that in there. Twin Soul the third card.
Yeah,
that...
but have you guys seen Twin Souls in the last 6 months?
Actually,
I don't know if I've seen one. Yeah, it's been a while.
I tried to play a 3-color. I tried to play 3-color Twin Soul Attack Matters deck. It didn't work out.
Oh, that's so cool.
Oh.
But you also need Skyax and then Hate Seeds and
Oh, I haven't tried it with Skyak. It used to be a Twin Soul deck that used like Commanders, Axe Grinders, and it had all of those cards. Maybe if you put in Skyak, it would also make it really insane. I haven't thought about that. That's pretty good.
I should try that.
I think that when it comes to Twin Soul, a lot of players have experienced it with the tow ship, stuff like that, and went for like a lot of token deck with the Fugus. But when you compare that, I think that when you compare that to the blue-green whale we had, it's just a lot stronger and just more and can withstand the AoE most of the time. So I think that's the reason we don't see it anymore.
Yeah, Twin Swords just dying to Firestorm is like a reason that you don't really want to like use it as for try hard climbing, or if you really care about winning, you don't want to run Twin Sword because a top tier deck should have no weakness.
I think Twin Soul, I mean, we don't want to maybe span this too long, but it could probably deserve another adjustment like Mistral Guide got, where you change the types of lands required, so it would be like 2/2 and then 2 wild, and that might make it a little more accessible, but yeah.
You know what my suggestion for Twin Sword would be? I would like to see it work with hand buffs, so let's say the mirrored version also gets the buff, so let's say you have the what's it called, the Sky Captain, then the other copy gets the buff, or if you have a Court Chester, the other copy gets the buff.
Yeah, that'd be a nice addition.
Like that's just a small touch to maybe build it in a certain direction.
You imagine? Oh, you can't Oakling feed to buff it anymore, but in the old Oakling feed, you Oakling feed, get +5/+5, and then summon 2 of those that are double buffed. Oh my god, I'm so happy they nerfed that sidebar.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
Alright, I think we've touched on that. Is there any card that's really OP that people complain about at the moment you guys think I might have missed? Or any cards that get complained about? I think we touched most of them.
I'd say Tree.
Oh yeah, sorry, Tree. Yeah, a lot of people are saying Tree's OP. Like going into the Monthly Cup, everyone expected to see Tree. Like people thinking Tree was going to be broken. And then there was also people on the fence. They weren't sure. They're like, no one's playing, yellow tempo on ladder to test it for Tree. It was really rare to see any quality games to know the level of Tree. A lot of people wanted streamers to play it. Maybe we can just quickly go through this. Do you guys think Tree is OP? Do you guys like Tree as a card? I'm actually personally a huge fan of Tree. I love this card because of the dynamics it adds to the game. But, maybe some other people don't like it because it's a turtle card. Let's pass this through to Zaldin. What's your thoughts on the card? You want it nerfed? Do you like it?
I dislike the card entirely.
It's because you play slow decks.
I play slow decks. Like, get out of control. No, it's partly because for 2 reasons actually. I think the balance is fine. The card deserves to be exactly what it is if it's going to be in the game. I don't think it deserves to be in the game because it makes everyone's choice in the game very linear. And I mean that in 2 ways. If you're playing against a guy and you know he has Tree, you're preparing yourself to find the Tree. If you're the guy who's playing the Tree, you want it in your hand at the exact moment when you can play it, and not before then, because it's like you got to ramp to it. But if you get to your ramp and you don't have tree, you're screwed. So it just makes the game very linear. I know it sounds like it gives interesting, complex design choices, but people are just so frustrated trying to run around and kill this damn tree. That's my 2 cents.
I think that's a great point to go on, that it does force everyone to play around, can my deck beat a tree? And not a lot of decks can. It's very limited, the amount of decks that can beat tree. Lou, what's your thoughts on tree?
It's just the king of greed decks, and
yeah,
it makes it so if you play anything that just chills, sits on its board, maybe waits until it draws its card, but doesn't really try to close out the game as soon as possible, there's no way you're going to win this, because the game plan of these tree decks just leads to a way where they always get the tree as soon as possible, and yeah, from then on it's like no longer losable for them. So
maybe
I don't know.
Maybe to tie in is, what kind of nerf would you want to see for it, if you have an idea? If you don't have an idea, you can just pass it forward.
Once again, I think the scaling is way off. So I think 7/7 buff for 7 Pharaoh is cool. Like if they do it on one turn and spend 7 Pharaoh to get 7/7 stats, that's totally fine. But the problem is that it buffs all creatures on your hand. So if it was 7/7 stats spread randomly on your hand, so it's good if you have only one creature, like you can get one huge frog tosser. But it's just way too much if you have like 3 or 4 cards on your hand and you play one, feed it, have enough Pharaoh to play them all. That's where I see the problem. It's just the scaling. Like one time 7/7 buff is okay. I think you can come back from that if it's like a couple of turns on board. But if it's the whole hand that gets buffed, it's just too much for me.
I would prefer something, if you're going to keep it in the game, something that went to the old Rune and Shrine style where it absorbs damage. I thought that was a very interesting type of green mechanic that gave green some cool choices and board presence. So I think I would prefer something like that.
Yeah, to add some clarity for people that aren't familiar with the Rune and Shrine, it used to be, I think it was a 5 life structure that costs 3 Feria or something like that, and whenever you would hit into a creature or hit into the enemy orb, the Shrine would absorb that much damage. So, you know, if you hit face for 5, it just eats that 5 damage and then pops. They've since redesigned it to be this Feria ritual. When you drop the Rune and Shrine, you get 2 Feria. But that was one of the older designs. And yeah, I think that actually would be a really interesting idea, is have it, rather than making you immune, meaning library's insane, meaning they can no longer go face to close the game, it's a bit too strong when it is on the board, so that would definitely be interesting. S, do you agree with that, or do you want it to stay what it is?
No, of course not. It's super strong right now. I just think that the problem is that, okay, there's a few problems. First of all, when you play the tree, you get instant value. You get immediate value. If you have cards in your hand, if you have like stalkers and frog tossers, just get immediate value. If they remove the tree, you don't really care, because you can just play the cards and win the game with the tossers and the stalkers. In some cases, I think that another problem is the 7 health. It would be easier to counter if it was 6 health.
6, yeah.
Yeah, 6 is something that people can
6
manage.
lines up well, yeah.
Exactly.
Like double flame burst, double command, ground shake, and then hit. It's so hard to get 7 damage.
Exactly, 7 damage is just too much. And maybe change the text of the card to be production instead. Maybe this would give some time to other decks to counter it. I don't know. Just that's my thoughts on the card.
Yeah, it would be interesting to see people forced to run Imperial Engineer to get the trigger, but then would that almost be a buff? Because if you're running libraries and then you're running tree and you triple engineer to get 3 copies like 3 triggers instantly, maybe that's even stronger. Probably not. Yeah.
Yeah. And
yeah,
it means
probably
you can
not.
Play 1 less green creature you can play, and that gets buffed.
Then Choke would be the only one who's playing tree anymore. Because he's the engineer fan.
Yeah, production would be a pretty big nerf, I think. Alright, Lizard, what's your thoughts on the card?
Yeah, I mean, like you guys touched on, it limits design, deck building, in that you can't play any slow decks or anything that's remotely close to being a slow deck. Because even, let's be real, these ramp decks, they are meant to be slower, greedy decks, but when you can have your whales out turn 4 and all this crazy stuff happens with the elementals and the earthcrafts and willow feeds, it feels more like a tempo deck, to be honest, more than a greed deck. So yeah, I don't know, it limits deck building.
Did I just hear willow feed? Can we maybe spend one moment to talk about feed? Like, what's your thought on Feed the Forest?
In my opinion, feed was broken in Green Yellow Haste, and it's the reason Green Yellow Haste was broken. It wasn't Oakling. Oakling wasn't the problem, in my opinion. It's just being able to feed your haste creatures again, regain that Farrier. That was the main issue. And feed is still incredibly strong, even in a monocolor deck or a dual color deck, yet like we have seen in the blue-green ramp now. It's crazy. And it's also another thing that comes to the rise of feed is that Windfall got nerfed, so blue automatically became way weaker. And now feed is the best way to gain Farrier in the game. Basically, Willow feed is the best combo.
I feel like if you remove Feed the Forest from the game, mono green would be super helpless. Like, mono green is really the deck that depends most on feed. And I think where it's broken right now is like in this blue-green decks, because you have the cycle, you have the Farrier ramp. That's all you need to accelerate your late game cards, and that's why, like, you might hear me say this about many cards, but for Feed the Forest I would like to see an increase in the land requirement, and I feel like it should be 4 forests, so it's a bit more exclusive to these mono green decks and not just splashed in every blue green deck or crack fun decks. That's why I don't like this card, because you can't just make decks and put the best thing from every color in, and go ahead, Zaldin.
Yeah, I agree. If green had other tools to gather Farrier and ramp in that manner, then maybe we could have some options. But that's it. Like, it's the glue holding any green deck together. So
yeah,
I like the
good
card though as a flavor. It's a nice design overall, I think.
Yeah, it lines up nicely for getting the value from your when you play a Voice of Truth, and then you can feed it back. So it just adds a lot of synergy in green. That's kind of cool. And I think you guys are right that maybe feed should be touched on, just because in the Discord we actually see feed brought up a bit more than even the oversky cards. A lot of people think that feed should have been the preemptive nerf to balance the ramp decks. And one of the nerfs I've seen strongly suggested is, you make it a 4 forest card or a 5 forest card, and then it's still viable for green, but now with these mixed color decks it's a lot harder to get value from. And is that something that you guys want, is seeing feed at 4 forest, 5 forest? Or do you think that design should be redone? Maybe a card that eats maybe a green creature that eats another creature and you gain Farrier based off its life, or something different with no card draw. So do you guys want to see it gutted, redesigned, or just more lands?
I think there's a band-aid solution, which is more lands, but your idea about a creature eating another one is far more flavorful. Yeah.
It would definitely hurt some of these like combo decks that just want to ramp up, but I don't know, maybe it just opens more possibilities.
Yeah, and then
the question is, will it just cripple mono green or something like that, or just the blue green in a way that it can't really compete with decks like Yellow Tempo and other decks that can get fair really easily and have cheap creatures? I do think that it's a little strong right now. I just, like Lou likes to say, it's a cheat card. But it's just insane with the tree that you can feed a 2020 something, and that's so crazy.
Yeah.
All right, I think that's all it for the cards that have been, hated on by the Discord in terms of balance. Let's. Oh, is there a card I missed?
I wanted to bring up Flame Burst. It's a card
Okay,
that's bothering me a bit because there's not really that much decision making when you build a deck with your red cards. Do you want the Firebomb or want the Flame Burst? Like usually it's always a Flame Burst because it can go phase. 3 damage is more flexible, so you can like always deal 4 damage with Ground Checker Flame Burst. So generally you go for the lower damage because that's not as clunky in hand. And I would like to see Flame Burst also not in every hybrid deck. So that's my main problem. Like it's okay that mono red has the extra reach. So you can expect them to triple Flame Burst your face and you lose. But if you have to expect it from red, yellow burn, if you have to expect it from Crackthorn decks, there's just too many decks where you feel, oh no, I'm on 8 health, I'm going to die soon. So I would like also Flame Burst to get 1 more land requirement. That's also a nerf because in the early game you can't like turn 2, clear a 3 health creature. So I think that's what I would like to see in terms of Flame Burst as well.
Yeah, just to bring that into another light, a lot of the Discord's been complaining about Flame Burst where the opponent's on 10 life, suddenly the red player just draws every turn and doesn't do anything, and they just wait to find 3 Flame Bursts and Cypher's Wrath. And so a lot of people are saying, can Flame Burst be changed to not go phase?
Because... Maybe we want to hear ESofDawn's opinion on Flame Burst.
Obviously, I'm gonna say I like because it won't be the game, but yeah, it's pretty strong. It's like Lou said, it's a lot stronger than Firebomb.
It's just everywhere. That's the problem.
Yeah, just options, but you have to consider that. For example, let's take the red combat against the sack matchup, for example. You need to push damage, and then you have no way to clear to push through once the sack player has come back. Soul Eaters and stuff like that. It's just a way for the red player to finish the game because the late game of the red player is not that strong as the other decks.
So you're saying that red needs to have this reach and that it's something that should stay, even though it is sometimes frustrating?
I'm also fine with it hitting face. I just don't want it to be in any deck that runs red to have this option. Like that's what bothers me. Like if you want to build a Crackthorn deck and it should be a bit more controlish, maybe you actually want a Firebomb. But right now, like people will always go for the Flame Burst.
Yeah, again, I think this is one of those issues that comes down to the card pool, and if there were, say, another 50 cards, you would have to start seeing cards that offer a color, another option. That's when you can maybe diversify a bit. If you put it at 3, if you put Flame Burst at 3 lands, you really hurt the early game in terms of red strategy to gain value in the early game, which usually is remove the other guy's collector so I can establish a board. And I mean I know what you're saying and I get it, but without more cards, the game has a hard time expanding in this way. If you change it, like a bunch of things slide off the cliff. You know what I mean?
Yeah, great point to bring up. So, maybe just I wouldn't want to see Flame Burst change to be higher land, just because I agree a lot of the reds. Sorry about that. A lot of red's balance is around its current cards, and I think if you adjust that, you might just end up throwing it off scale, like Zaldin's saying. So if a change were to be made, I'd rather it just not go face, but I understand completely you need red to have this reach in order to get games, so maybe a card that shouldn't be changed, I think would end up being the general consensus here. Going through that, now I think we've touched all the cards. I'm just going to double check with Lou. Is there another card that I missed? In terms of cards that would need to be nerfed?
Oh.
No, okay. So On the flip side now, guys, let's talk about the oversky cards that we're slightly disappointed with, that maybe we think should be buffed up a bit. And I know we have one to start with already that, we've highlighted, and it's Salamander. A lot of you guys are looking at it like, 6 Faria. Why is this 6 Faria? It was one of the conversation topics that was actually brought up not by me, but by, I think it was ESofDawn, right? So, what do you guys think of Salamander? Go ahead and take it away.
I think it's just a little bit too expensive, to be honest. If you look at the card, it's really easy to look at the old Salamander. Maybe because the old Salamander is so bad. I don't know. In like if you're running this in Crackdown, you just have so many other options that are probably better than that. If it was like 5 Faria, I would gladly play it in Crackdown.
Yep.
But at 6 Faria, it just I'm just not sure that it has the impact.
I don't know if you noticed, but it used to be 4 Faria actually, from the first version they released when they made an announcement. So like you said, it should be 5 Faria, because I don't know why they didn't go for a middle ground. How could they consider this can't be in the game for 4 Faria, and then all of a sudden, oh no, we actually make it 2 Faria more expensive.
Yeah,
like,
exactly. Yeah,
we put X Grinder in the game for 2 Faria, but no, now we make X Grinder be a 4 Faria card.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
like,
I mean, it's just like you said. At 4 Faria, it's too strong, obviously. But
I mean, the old Salamander, is the old Salamander 4, or is it?
It's 5. It's 5.
Yeah.
It's,
like, how can it be cheaper and have more effect?
It's crazy. Yeah.
And also the land requirements don't really matter on it, because by the time you play a Salamander, you already have your 4 mountains and 4 forests, unless you rush with it.
I do like the fact that you have to play it the positional play exactly. It really helps with strategy. I think it's really good, but again, at 6 Faria, even if you feed it, it's I don't know. Maybe if you feed it, it's okay, but at 6 Faria, it's just
You haven't played during the time with the old Shaitan vampire, right?
No.
No. Because
What
like
was
that was a card that was complained a lot about. I personally didn't like it. Used to be also adjacent creatures gained a health drain, so it was a 7/6 or a 7/4. It was 7/4.
It was a 7/2. Wasn't it a 7/2 body? Or was it 7/4? Oh, okay, yeah.
And it drained the health, so it absorbed the health and got it himself from adjacent creatures. So it was very common that you run it in rush decks, so you just double land and open with Battletoad your opponent. You would just had this smile on your face the whole time.
It's just a huge.
It was so hard
to deal
with.
What's the card I'm looking for? Adventurer? It's like a better adventurer.
But it killed everything. So.
It drained 2. It drained 2. So when you drained the Battletoads, it would just kill them. But against stuff like Wood Elemental, you just drain a Wood Elemental and have like a 7/6, which was, it's fine, right? Because then you have the Soul Drain, you can finish off the Wood Ellie as well.
I lost thousands of toads. Thousands of them.
That's just crazy, yeah.
I'm still a bit sad it's gone, actually. It was just too powerful in terms of stats. Like, I think it was just too big for me. I don't get why it was 7 attack. It could have been 5 attack and would still be viable. But it was pretty cool, like with Windpoint Champions and Desert Twisters to line up big Shaitan Vampires. So yeah, that's what this card reminds me of. It's nice to see something similar back, but yeah, like you guys mentioned, too expensive, and that's probably not good enough. But Heavy disagrees. One of my friends, he's been really liking it in some mid-range red-green decks.
Yeah, to touch on the note you brought up though about the 4 Faria and then the jump to 6 Faria, you have to keep in mind when it was teased at 4 Faria, it was when we had the 4/6 Frog Tosser and the 6/8 Skywhale. So maybe it was just balanced for a different meta. And then after the feedback of Frog Tosser, after the feedback of Skywell, maybe with a relook they changed
it. Too, didn't it?
No. I think it was 4 fairy at 2/4 with the same mechanic.
Right.
For some reason, I also thought it had dash, but yeah.
I thought it had dash at one point, which was even more broken.
Yeah, that would be a nightmare to play around.
Yeah.
Now, I guess we've just generally consensus that it's a bit too overcosted to be played competitively, even though Heavy thinks it's pretty strong. Is this a card you guys want pushed though? Do you want this to be the replacement to Crackthorn, or this like 5 fairy version to buff like a 2 mountain 2 forest variant, or do you not like it?
I like the way Heavy makes it work. He sent me his list and he's playing it very like a more aggressive version than Crackthorn, because you only need 4 lands and you get close to your enemy, so you will get the damage off and then you play creatures around. If we want to nerf it by 1 Farrier, I mean buff it by reducing the cost with 1 Farrier, we could just also remove 1 health from it. So that would probably be a fair exchange where it gets slightly better, but like not too strong. I also don't like why it has the same stats as Blazing Salamander. Maybe thematically, yeah, but I don't like having a similar card that does the same just better. I would actually like to see a Salamander rework to have it deal the attack damage instead, so you could have some synergy with Covert Barracks and stuff. Yeah.
I just want the old Salamander to get a little bit of a buff, you know?
Yeah.
It's
It used to be very strong when it was 3/6. That was a long time ago though. There was a meta when you ran Salamanders and Aurora's Creation and used it for Boardkey instead of Firestorm.
The old blue-red control.
Yeah.
I wonder, to me, as a design choice, I think it might be misguided. Although, I mean, I get the appeal of the card. We already have Blazing Salamander and Crackthorn, and basically the new Salamander is what Crackthorn probably should have been. So it's interesting to me that they make the choice to include this card and double down on a mechanic where you could have made a card that has a very different type of style, still within the themes of red and green. But I mean, it's not bad. But you see what I mean? It's almost like a wasted opportunity to change Crackthorn to the Emerald and then bring in something sort of fresh. But
all right, I think we're done with Emerald Salamander there. I think that is one of the weaker cards that some people wanted brought up. Is there any other weaker cards that we can open it up to discuss? Because going through the list,
Genius.
Yeah, and the Rakoa Chieftain, the Rakoan Reveler, it's pretty weak.
Reveler?
It should be 1 mountain. I think.
I agree with that.
So you can play turn 1 like an X grinder, like
1 mountain.
Why would you run? Yeah, like I think this would be really cool, playable at 1 mountain, easier to splash also.
I mean, at the moment, it's the problem. What do you want to play? Do you want to play a Brigand that can potentially generate more Theria, and it's even worth as if it only triggers the combat once, because that's the 1 Theria.
Also, what's the role of this card? Like, if it's on 2 mountains, you almost have to like build your deck around it, so you get lots of Farrier back. But if it's just 1 mountain, you can play it turn 1. It's just a good harvester. But with 2 mountains, it's not really worth, because you have better options for harvesting creatures.
Now, before we go too far into thinking about 1 mountain or buffs to it, though, is the Reveler only being held back at the moment because red control at the moment is forced to go aggressive, because there's the blue-green ramp deck that punishes you? Like, if you don't close the game out against blue-green, you just lose the game. So if blue-green, like Tree of Everlife, got nerfed and suddenly red actually sits back as a strategy, Reveler is going to be a lot stronger, because suddenly you can just sit back, which means your one attack creature isn't as much of a detriment early on. So do you guys see what I mean? Do you agree? Or do you still think it would need to be buffed?
I see what you mean, but I feel like a red deck that sits back is just it's kind of a red burn, maybe a mono red burn list that sits back, and I think that in that deck the Rakoan Reveler is just, it doesn't fit in that deck.
Yeah, you kind of need to build your deck around, like you would maybe run Longhorn Yaks, Steamforge, Cobalt Barracks, that kind of stuff. Maybe one thing could be scary is if you run Steamforge and go first. If it was one mountain, you could like turn one Reveler into Steamforge and see your Farrier, yeah, see your Farrier count go up. But that would get countered by Swallow, would get countered by Frogify, so I don't think it's as cheesy. It's also only a 2 health creature, so you could always kill it with Spiders, Soul Rain, Cypher's Wrath. So yeah, I would like to see it just a change to one land.
It's kind of a card ahead of its time. I agree with you, Cap, that basically we don't want to play it yet, but we might. I mean, it might work in a sack kind of list down the line when a certain meta is not in style, like Swallow or that sort of thing. Reveler just isn't quite there. It's not quite ready to see play.
Yeah, great point there. Lizard, do you agree? Disagree?
No, I agree with everything that has been said. We might see Reveler in sort of like a red-green deck, perhaps, because you want the buffs. At this point, unfortunately, attack buffs matter a lot less than health buffs. So yeah, probably if any decks is going to get some use for this card, it's going to be green-red. But then again, you have all these other options that are much more viable at the moment in Crackthorn. So I don't think there's much. Maybe we can get with the Salamander rework or with the Salamander buff. Maybe we can get some sort of blue, some sort of green-red swarm deck where you just play as many little creatures as possible and try to get the most Salamander value. But as of now, like you guys touched on, it's not really playable at 6 Farrier, and the Reveler itself is just a worse Underground Brigand, basically.
Yeah, Lou, did you have a finer note to touch on there, or were you done with that?
No.
Okay, so I want to keep this within the 2-hour segment, so let's try and go a bit faster through these cards, but any other card you guys want to raise? So Reveler, I think it's a gray area, but it could go one mountain if the blue-green isn't severely nerfed, is I think the general consensus there.
Yeah.
What other cards?
I have one card.
Genius.
Monkey Genius.
The Monkey Genius. That
just
card
let
is.
it be a troll card. I mean, we don't. Like, there's no way to make this.
Oh my god.
Now,
even the design of the card, I don't like. You need to be in a bad spot. Like you need your opponent to have a good board in order this card to be good. So.
Well, you need to have played badly.
Yeah. So if your opponent played badly, you get rewarded. Or...
It's not even worth if you have the AoE clear, because you need them to collect. So compared to a Daring Adventurer, like also he has lots of creatures on board, but you can remove them after you play the Adventurer. In this case, if you play the Monkey Genius, you want him to have as many creatures as possible at the following turn, so he can collect. So
one thing to touch on though is, let's say you're Yellow Rush, right? You double land up, you desert. You're up against Crackthorn, they're double collecting. You drop this, they double collect instantly. You have a 4/6, right? This is one of the higher statted creatures that Yellow Rush could have. So imagine, just if you're thinking it needs to be massively buffed, imagine Yellow Rush suddenly punishes you for touching 2 wells. Suddenly you have this supercharged creature, and it's way easier to get off than Daring Adventure in that regard. So it's redesign maybe, or do you actually want it buffed?
Sounds so situational to me. And as Yellow Rush, you often you want to control the board as Yellow Rush, right?
Yeah. That's a genius plan, by the way. Okay.
Yeah. Sorry, I interrupted you. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just think that I mean, at 2 lands, it's just a little bit too slow.
Yeah, maybe one land.
Yeah, maybe 1 land, or even no lands, like even just neutrals. If you have to compare this card to a Daring Adventure, like with Daring Adventure, it's not that it's much easier to get the buff, and it can trade into the creatures. And with that card, you might be too far away, and in some cases, and when your opponent double collects, you can just find the answer to the card easily. So
yeah, it's good that you mentioned Daring Adventure again, because like
you can play the adventure and then kill the creatures that you've gotten the buff of. With Monkey Genius, you can't do that. You just throw your monkey out on the board and say, yeah, let's go,
Yeah.
monkey. You can do this.
I mean, you guys are talking about Monkey Genius, which is potentially, in best case scenario, a 6/4, but then we have good old Maceman Faceman here, which can just be summoned turn 2 and win you the game.
Oh,
It's-
Maceman, such a good card.
Yeah, Maceman is great.
mean,
like,
especially we saw that in the last monthly cup. I mean, I know that this is a card that Cappu really likes and he used that all the time, but I didn't feel like it was in the meta like maybe 1 month ago. Yeah, but it's back to punish the greedy blue-green decks.
Yeah, Lou. I think I mentioned this during Lou's stream, but Lou predicted this a year ago with the red control running Maceman, and I was like, Lou, what are you doing? It's a 4-fairy 4/4. Why would you play that? Little did I know, a year later it's in a monthly cup. Pretty strong card.
I think at the time there was no combat in red, so if we had no red combat, it would also be like still in red control lists.
I think Brigand always existed, but there's no Gift of Steel to augment it.
Yeah, that's what I meant. Yeah. I ran Brigands and Maceman in my red control, so yeah. Without gift.
I just want to reiterate though with the Monkey Genius, like you guys are saying Daring's a bit easier, but if you think about blue, you think about all these other decks against Rush, usually they start beside their orb, they have one creature on each side collecting. I feel like in that situation you can Daring next to one of them and get a 4/4, or you can just drop this Monkey Genius and get a 4/6. So some of you guys are discarding as, you know, maybe Daring's a bit more practical, but at least for me I look at it as Monkey Genius is actually the more practical one.
I mean, you can double land with the Daring. You can't double land with the Monkey Genius.
Yeah, but you don't want to double land a ton of TLRs. You want to actually double land Desert. Whereas with the Daring Adventure, you have to double land sometimes. So it's actually a bit worse for you in that
just
regard.
Play a Shaitan Demon that's always a 5/4 for free Faria.
Well, I mean, you would run this on top of Shaitan Demon. I'm not saying you cut Shaitan Demon.
Whoa, no one's cutting Shaitan Demon.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, if the opponent starts with the double battle thoughts, for example, you can just punish him so hard with the with double land, and that's with the adventurer.
If they're player 1 and they Lake beside and then Lake on the other side Battletoads and you double land it, you can double land Explore and then you can actually play the Daring to get a 6/6. So that does sometimes happen.
It does provide some nice input though. Having a Taunt and a Rush deck potentially is could be very interesting, but could also be a bit oppressive, I'd say, depending on what your opponent plays and how, if he has an answer to deal with the taunt. Because we haven't seen much taunts in Rush. We've only seen them defending.
I mean,
taunt is I think underrated. That's actually, but I don't know. Should we talk much more about the Monkey Genius?
we can move on now. I think everyone's made their argument. So, opening it up again to the next card for discussion. Anyone have a recommended card?
I'd like to talk about the Seed of Paradise.
Okay.
You think it's very weak, right, Cappu?
Yeah, it's well. Okay, here's the deal. It's very strong in sack if Stalker was deleted. If Stalker was deleted, it'd be strong in sack even with the risk of it dying sometimes, because later in the game you can just wait to Wrangler it, so you can actually play around its vulnerability late game. But early on, Stalker is just instantly a punish.
So if we reverse this, the problem is that it's too low health, because we don't want to remove Stalker from the game just to have Seed be somewhat viable.
Exactly.
So I feel like it should be 3 health. 4 health would be too much. But if you think about 2 Faria, Sturdy Shell has 5 health, so and it collects the whole game. So I don't know why Seed only needs to be 2 health. That makes it a very high risk card to play, which I don't like. And yes, green has is quite dominant when it comes to land ramp, but if we want this card to be viable, it should be 3 health. So
question for you: what if Seed of Paradise was in blue?
Yeah.
Oh, that would be
I was
insane.
Just thinking about it to maybe be a different color. Like that's a really nice idea. Like I felt maybe being neutral, but maybe that would be too broken. But yeah, as blue, I really like the idea. Make it
So
blue
maybe
3 health.
Maybe come back from River then, if Seed managed to find its way into
Yeah.
blue.
How about making it like a
But then we
wildland?
need to remove library from the game.
Yeah.
I don't want to seed into water elemental into
Yeah.
seed into
I
library.
was just thinking, maybe you just take the gamble of Stalker killing it, just have the chance of winning with library. It's like if you seed and water alley to find your library earlier,
No, but
it's just so much more
Yeah.
broken.
the game shouldn't be like so
Yeah.
draw dependent. Like, do you have the answer or not? You win the game. Yes, no. So
All right, anyone want to bring something else up, or do you guys agree that it could be 3 life?
or a blue card.
Not a blue card. God no.
Yeah, I don't think
Yeah,
I want to see
Pretty
that.
much, yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Zaldin, you were gonna bring up a card. What was your suggested card to talk about?
Yeah, I mean, Dreamkeeper, I think would be interesting to see some potential changes to, or I think possibly a small buff. I've been playing it a lot the last few days, and you know what? It's mostly that I just wanted to have a buff because I love the idea and the style, and it feeds into control. But I'd be interested to hear everyone else's feedback. What have you guys seen from Dreamkeeper? Do you like it? Do you not like it? That sort of thing.
I feel like the costs are very high, but once you draw a lot of cards, it's actually insane value. Like, let's say you can discount a full hand, 9 cards. That's 9 Pharaoh discount for 4, so you gain plus 5 Pharaoh, but the value is delayed, so that comes at a very high cost of early game tempo. I think the stats are just too weak. It's nice that it has Taunt, so because these decks want to stall and wait until they draw the reduced cards, but it should be at least 4 health. That's what I would like to see. Then it's not weak to AoE. Yeah, I mean, like being a 1/3 is just too weak, I think. Yeah, that's
Okay,
mine.
and then
It's
Blizzard, what's your thoughts?
It's actually only 4 reduction because you play the Dreamkeeper. That means you only have 8 remaining cards in hand.
Yeah,
But
that's
yeah, I
true.
think it could use a buff for sure. It's nice in gimmicky decks if you build like a monk deck that draws like crazy. Then you can get fast stats where you can potentially OTK. Also, another synergy I really like with it is the Storm, Spawn, and Failed Experiment. Because if you shuffle those into your deck, you gain the Farrier back, the literal Farrier value, which is always nice. And another neat synergy is with the Sky Captain, actually. I don't know if you guys been messing around with that.
I copied your deck idea.
Sky Captain is insane with the Dreamkeeper.
Yeah, you can keep shuffling your fairies back and buff them again and again. It's really fun.
All right, and then oh sorry, you have another note.
It's not that competitive. It's not that competitive yet, but it's a card that makes you happy. It's fun design.
It makes me happy, man.
Yeah.
All right, ESofDawn, do you want it to be 4 life, or what do you think?
I mean, it's a really nice card. It creates a lot of really interesting decks, like Lizard said. Even with like Sky Captains and Salmon, the Salmon can get quite big for one Feria, which is kind of funny. I really like the fact that that it has Taunt, so it kind of slows it might maybe slow the other player down just a little bit for you to get the combo you need. And the fact that it has only one mountain lake land, you just need only one mountain. I've seen people play it in river, which is quite interesting.
Yeah.
I'm
the
not
best deck for it.
That card. It's really cool with those land requirements. I liked it.
Yeah, it's just a card that can fit into a lot of interesting decks. I don't think one health buff, making it a 1/4, would be too broken. I think it's fine.
Okay. And then I guess to go in parallel to this, you guys want to talk about Gem Shell, or are you guys happy with the current level of Gem Shell?
I mean, it's insane value, but blue red is still maybe a bit too defensive. which is not that needed in the current meta, so it's not right now as much of a problem. If we see a meta shift, that card is incredible. And the thing what I don't like about the gem shell is design-wise, it puts so much weight on your draw RNG. There's a huge difference if you can get a Firestorm from it, or if you just get, I don't know, a Gabriel Archon if you run that, or a Gabriel Archon would be insane, but Gabriel Commander, let's say that you gain 2 0-cost Gabriel Commanders, it's whatever. You gain a Windfall, you gain plus 10 Farrier. So
yeah,
that's what I don't like.
I feel like it's kind of a hit or miss card, you know.
Yeah.
Just like Lou said, it can be quite slow, you know. If you don't get the right starting hand in time, sometimes you can just get rushed, and it just at 6 lands you want it to have an impact. Again, you can look at the Frog Tosser. It has 6 lands and has an immediate impact on the board, as in the Gem Shell. It may or may not. You know, it's just a little bit too random.
Yeah, it looks like they gave this as a tool to blue-red bargain, just so that, you know, these bargain decks can move into Oversky and maybe have a chance to still be in the meta somewhat as a, you know, fringe tier 1.5, tier 2 deck. But yeah, I see what you guys are meaning. It is really polarizing when it lines up, but that's sort of the nature of bargain. I mean, if you dance into a bargain or into a bargain or into Hellfire, like, that's what the deck is designed around, so people that like this thing, I think will still like the gem shell mechanic regardless. So, yeah, Oh, go ahead, Solden.
I was mostly interested in seeing if it worked outside of bargain. So before I got onto the Dreamkeeper, I was doing a lot of gem shell, just trying to fit it into everything. You know, Blood Song, any kind of sevens. You know, Mochi. Is it going to be viable at all? And I just found it really not working very well at all. A couple instances you get some nice one-offs, but outside of bargain, I don't know if it has a serious place. I don't mean necessarily a viable place, but it always fell flat in those other decks, and that's what kind of turned me off of it recently. Is I want it to be something that can be across different archetypes, and I think it really only belongs in bargain at the moment. So
yeah, it's cool though that it has 2 wildlands, so you can splash green or yellow. Yellow probably not as much, but green fits with the land ramp. But yeah.
Yeah, I also want to add that. Sorry, go ahead, Lizard.
I think it would be nice if we could get cards in the future that allow us to manipulate a deck. So we can shuffle some cards on top of it or do something like that. And then Gem Shell could become way stronger than it is now. But as of now, we don't really have that. We have draw, but we don't have manipulate deck.
Yeah, I think one of the issues that, aside from it being random, is just that it's a little bit too slow. You know, if you play it against a 3 deck right now, it's just you're gonna lose like most of the time if you can deal with the 3.
Well, that's my problem of 3.
Yeah, yeah. So maybe if the 3 gets nerfed, we can see a rise of this archetype.
Yeah. And I mean, I think a lot of these cards, at least from talking with you guys individually, I think a lot of you guys are pretty happy with the power level. So just to skip over a bunch, like Salmon, I think you guys were all happy with. Going through the list, like Forgroa was pretty cool. Flight of the Mantas. Continuing through, we have Shifting Octopus. That's one a lot of people like. Like all of those cards, thumbs up to the devs, right?
What about the Balloonfish? Such a weird card that at first I thought that one. Yeah, I at first I thought that it would be insane, as did many other players I know. But after a while, it just seems not that strong. I don't know.
Well, they teased it at 2 Feria, I think, right? And then it came to servers at 3 Feria, so it was a weaker variant that went to live servers. But I think
Cappu has a cool list with it. I might show it on my next stream.
Yeah,
if he wants to play it.
There's some flying rush decks that you use Nat, use Aviary, use the Salmon synergy that are, I think, pretty strong. I don't know if it's better than, well, actually, I'm confident it's not better than Yellow Tempo, but I think of Yellow Rush versus Flying Rush. I think Flying Rush might actually be a stronger deck using the Balloonfish, so I think that one is a gray area for me. It needs more testing.
Oh, you played it in the show match, right? In the Monthly Cup.
Yeah, I played a game of it, but I was up against like green-red Crackthorn, so it's like kind of a counter. Kind of, yeah. Anyone to touch on that anymore? Or Balloonfish?
The artwork is pretty cool. I like the artwork.
Yeah, I like also the versatility of this card. You can also use him just to dash into the double collection spot. If like you do play with nets and your net gets summoned out of position, you can just bring them back into the enemy's face again. I want to see it work with some kind of strategy where you play maybe some immobile creatures like green creatures or red combat creatures and transport it to the enemy so you can use them to fight. That's what would interest me most, but it's a bit more gimmicky maybe to go for that route.
Okay, and then actually a card that I forgot to bring up, it is a card that's complained about a lot, but not for reasons you would think. Well, okay, it's reasons you would think after reading the card. A Stanu. Now, it says it cannot fight after being transformed, but it lies. If you feed it and your other creature gets transformed, you can attack. It lies.
They still haven't fixed
Oh
that.
my god.
No, on live servers, I was just looking at it the other day, and it still says it can attack. Let me just.
So hard to change the text.
I'm in game, so let me just quickly glance over it.
2 or 3 weeks ago.
Yeah, it can attack this turn. It still says that. So, for a lot of you guys that are looking at a Stanu and saying, "Oh, it's not that strong because it can attack," it actually can. So, I guess the question just to the panel: you guys just want that text removed, or do you think it should not be able to attack? Like, do you think they should fix it so it can't?
They said it's intentional and they will keep it like this.
Yeah, I think so as well.
Yeah. They said it in a.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was a mistake in terms of design. They actually wanted it to be something that they technically couldn't pull off very viably, but I like it better as it is now. It makes more sense.
Yeah, I've never pulled it off with what's the card called?
Feed the Forest or failed?
Failed experiment, yeah. I've actually never got that to work, but I haven't tried it that much. But that's what I think could be pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
And I've also never seen. Yeah. Sorry. I've never seen someone like clear whole board where the Istano just resummons and attacks another creature. Like that kind of. I don't think it can get out of hand that often.
Yeah, I kind of disagree with that. I think that it's like when I think about that card, it kind of looks like the old Runin, a little bit. I think that it can get a little bit out of hand, and it just can generate so much value, especially with like Gnats and stuff like that, which we don't see much being played, but even the mantas, the 2/2 mantas, and a lot of other tokens, like you either have an answer for it, like with Swallow or Flower, or if you can't clear the board, say with the Firestorm, or just clear the tokens before you kill Instano, it can be a problem.
Yeah, maybe you're right. Maybe the card has lots of potential, but right now there's not the meta or the deck that supports this to really get out of hand. But it definitely has the potential to be broken. But then again, Runin does as well, and he's in the game, and it's not as bad anymore.
Yeah, because of the Swallow mechanic. But if it ever gets nerfed, you know, the Flower and stuff like that, it's gonna be a problem, I think.
Yeah, I'm actually siding more on the side of ESofDawn. I've actually lost against it a couple times with Yellow Tempo, a deck that I think normally would be favored. But I lost because he got Flight of the Mantis out, Lore Thieves and stuff, and then he failed in Istanu. And then I had to look at his board, I'm like, I can't kill all of his tokens. And then one by one, he started doing the trades and clearing me off. And then that happened a couple other games too, and I'm like, okay, maybe this is more realistic than I'm giving it credit. So
finally
I
we have
know.
a counter to yellow tempo.
I kind of
I
look
mean,
at.
yes, Cappu, you will be unhappy, but
No, you gotta listen, guys. I have hated Archer despite playing it a lot, and I have hated that yellow tempo has remained the #1 deck for so long. Now, some people disagree it's number one. A lot of people thought Nats was kind of broken because it countered yellow, but then it lost to red. So, like, there was this archetype of what's actually broken, what's not broken, and I've always put yellow tempo as the broken deck. But yeah, going back to that, I've wanted yellow tempo nerfed for a long time, believe me. I've wanted it nerfed. So if there's a counter, I'm happy. But yeah, I think it's really, really strong if Swallow gets touched.
I mean, suppose we would nerf yellow tempo, how would you do it?
I think Flashwind and Training are the two most crazy cards. I thought at first it was Demon, but Demon you can actually just die if you don't have movement available.
yeah, the downside is pretty hurtful. Like the 2 damage from Demon hurts much more than the 2 damage from a library.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because you can just ignore the Demon and it like sometimes collects 1. But yeah, when I made a longer video on the post about balance, and they did quite a lot of these things. Like with the land requirement changes, they changed all the legendaries like Aurora, Kalim, Cypher. And I also had included Flashwind. I wasn't sure if it's Flashwind or Training. I think Flashwind, I also wanted to see it 3 deserts.
I disagree with that, but I think you bring up a good point. Flashwind versus Desert Twister is, I think, the real interesting comparison because nobody plays Champion anymore. No one plays Desert Twister anymore. I mean, I try, but what's the point? It's stupid. And it highlights the issue that Flashwind brings for yellow. It is so efficient. It is insanely efficient. And if a person has to build 3 deserts to get that power, they'll do it. You know what I mean? But if you gave it a cost, maybe it would bring it back into line. At least that's my opinion.
You benefit in 3 ways from Flashwind. Often you get 1 more collection, you get a good value trade, and you get your creature in a better spot where it can maybe collect again next turn and blocks a spot. So it's just the best tempo like you can
even
get.
The 4th synergy there, it discounts Colossus, it buffs Charger, like it actually synchronizes with the deck too. So it's like on top of those 3 other bonuses, you get the 4th bonus of it. It fits the deck perfect.
It's zero cost cards in general. Like if they are good as zero cost card, they're usually broken because Fairy is such an important resource, and like the old failed experiment, if you could play it for zero cost, it was also just really good. And yeah,
would you play Flashwind at 1 Feria?
I don't know. I only run 2 in my yellow tempo. At 1 Feria, I think it is a pretty big cost. I think it's a fair cost. I do think it's fair, but I don't know if I would play it at 1 Feria.
It denies, it disables a lot of plays, like the Flashwind to collect becomes significantly worse or even unplayable now if you put it at 1 cost.
Yeah, it would make this basically pointless. I think for 1 it would be very close. Maybe not as playable, but it's hard to tell.
I suppose that's my point. Is if you're gonna what does tempo generally have to sacrifice to make its plays versus what does a control deck have to sacrifice to make its plays? And I mean again, it's such a fine line. I think you're right. It would probably break the card, but I think it's an important question.
Yeah, I'm going to pass this over to S just because we haven't heard from him on this regard in terms of yellow tempo. Do you guys, or would you want to see it changed differently? Let's not spend too much time of this, so just if you have a couple notes for that. You still there, S? Or ESofDawn?
Yeah, I was muted for a second.
Okay.
Just to speak about the Flashwind issue for a second. I think 1 Feria is fair. I'm not sure it would be still playable in yellow tempo. Maybe players would include it just to take trades, but it may be played only in red yellow burn instead, where they have a little bit more Feria to work with and more impact with the card sometimes. Yeah, that's overall. Yeah, I think it's fine.
Yeah, okay. So I think we have a consensus there that maybe one Freya could get looked at, but it might actually just kill it from tempo. Alright.
I think 3 Desert is the more elegant way, because then also it's like in Red Yellow Burn is not the strongest at the moment, but then you know you don't have to play around it when it's only on 2 deserts.
Yeah, but you're gonna shut down Red Yellow Burn by doing that.
Well, okay. Actually, let's take a couple more seconds to look at this. Blue Yellow Disciple OTK is a deck that I really hate, and it going to Flash from being 3 Desert slows that deck down. And then a lot of people hate Mobility Burn just because when they have the nuts, it's just like you lose. They training a Brigand, gift it, hit face, suddenly you've lost the game on turn 4. Maybe it actually should be looked at 3 Desert. I'm actually starting to side on that more.
And also like the place where you have what's it called? Windstorm Charger. You go Desert Windstorm Charger, and then you just double neutral the same side, and you flash wind up and kill value trade in a creature.
Yeah, the impact's too early.
Yeah, like it's the same concept as with the old Prophet of Tide, where you just have this jumping creature in the middle, and the next turn it just gets moved, and then it jumps over and gets the trade on the other side. Like that's what makes tempo decks so strong, because they can move around, collect everywhere, and do that so early.
Alright, let's move on from this. Does anyone have a final card they want to bring up? I think we've gone through at least, what, like 20 of the 30 cards, so I think a lot of them we're just kind of happy with. Is there any card that you want to bring up that you think should get talked about?
What about Chaos, maybe? Emperor Chaos?
Oh, Chaos, yeah.
Chaos, yeah.
I don't know how you pronounce it.
Do you think it needs to get nerfed or buffed?
I just think that it's a really interesting card that but
it's maybe a bit oppressive design. At first I thought it was super strong, but this when I played on ladder, like I played against some fun decks and people were trying stuff, so that's why it probably worked so well.
It's really nice with command.
Yeah, right? Yeah, with command it's nice. I think it's even nicer with Aurora's creation, because if you have more and more Emperors on board, it just becomes a nightmare for your opponent to actually play creatures. They instantly lose 3 health and everything just dies. I think I overrated it a bit when I tried it. I would say it's in a decent spot, as long as there's enough ways to answer it.
Yeah. Does anyone here play Pandora? Anyone play Pandora?
I will get back into it. I haven't played in a long time.
Alright, I was thinking about updating my Pandora tier list, and I'm like, wait, I have no idea the impact of these oversky cards in Pandora, because I haven't played at all.
Yeah, you need to test it. I think you can't just look at it and say, because the meta is so different there.
Yeah, I was gonna
know what people are doing, probably green rushing or stuff like that.
I was gonna bring up the question of, are people just always picking Frog Toss? Are people always picking Skyward? Like, is it really broken in Pandora? But I guess if none of us play it, then there's no point in bringing up that question. I mean, maybe. Oh, go ahead.
I think a lot of the vanilla stats on, say, like the township are very good. Like just a sturdy body, I could imagine that being good in Pandora.
Yeah, yeah.
But other than that, I don't think there's too much change. At least like cards are tree and stuff are not as oppressive as they are in.
I would have thought tree is actually better in Pandora.
You think so?
That's what my gut would have been. Yeah. It is hard to find your land ramp cards, but at the same time, it's also very hard to close games in Pandora. And this also shuts down a lot of treasures that do face damage. Like, a lot of people try and just win the game with, what is it called?
It's where Astral Weapon gets top.
Oh my god, Astral Weapon, yeah.
Well, but let's be honest. If we saw Everlife in Pandora, we'd just take it anyways, right?
Yeah, and just hope for elementals and stuff, yeah.
Yeah.
I've never left out the croc pick. So.
Alright, so let's skip over Pandora then, just because I'll try and get someone on for the next episode that's high up in Pandora. Maybe he's been playing tons and he can give us feedback on what's frustrating, what's not. Alright, let's do this. I'll just let us go one by one just to bring up a final note, and then we'll close after that. So Zaldin, if there's any note you wanted to bring up, go ahead and bring it up to the panel.
Yeah, no, just that I think Oversky is a really, really good quality first expansion for a very small designer crew. And I think for a guy who spends most of his Feria time trying to design decks and not really worried about, smashing the ladder, I think it's been really, really interesting. And I want to encourage people to take it that way, to try and look at the game as being a place where you can actually have a lot of fun in these first few weeks after Oversky is released, because in a month and a half, people are going to be screaming and crying for some kind of a weird balance change. So it's been a nice change of pace, and I think people will find some interesting combos going down the line. Things like Curious Biomancer, cards like Balloonfish, a lot of these things haven't really been explored yet. So I think there's some cool opportunities ahead.
All right, and then Lou.
Yeah, I think Selin almost mentioned all the important points. I'm positively surprised. I mean, the Frogtoss and the Sky Whale disaster in the start before the hotfix was kinda crazy, but yeah, right now we're in a good spot. I would say the meta is slightly more enjoyable. Yeah, it's definitely more enjoyable than the blue jump, yellow tempo meta. We have more variety now. I really hope for the future of Feria that they stick to regular balance patches. Like there was a time where they didn't do any balance at all. Just some tiny tweaks, like changing the right stuff to make everything more enjoyable. In a way where I think skill matters more than card draw or any RNG effects, because that's like why people enjoy Feria, because the option of the board gives you so much room for making decisions. And yeah, that's my final thoughts.
All right, and then ESofDawn.
Yeah, I agree with Lou on that. I think they did a really good job. I think that we are really close to seeing a really balanced meta. There's only just a few cards that we talked about that need some balance changes. But yeah, I don't think that would be a problem for the team. I really like the Wildlands, the introduction of Wildlands. I think it's really cool, especially on cards that has an original color, like for example the Shifting Octopus or the Flight of the Mantas. Yeah, they did a good job.
All right, and then Lizard.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more on the Wildlands. It's just you have to be cautious when it comes to designing neutral cards, such as Flower or the Whale, because if you make these cards too powerful, the neutral cards with the Wildlands, the best deck will be Land Ramp. There's no other deck that will be as good as abusing these cards as a Land Ramp deck, and that's kind of sad because it limits deck building. But if you have, on the other hand, cards like Mistral Guide, for example, which I think is a fantastic example for the efficient use of Wildlands, or the good use of Wildlands, which encouraged the multicolor deck building. I think if you take a step in that direction more, we'll have a great expansion and great expansions in the future. Yeah.
All right, and then I actually said I was going to answer two questions from the chat. So one of them that was asked just a bit earlier was, we talked about how Feria can grow its player base, and my answer would just be do what Lou mentioned. Well, it just briefly would be what Lou mentioned. Do these little changes every once in a while just to keep Feria active and fresh, so that people keep coming back and then stay active and then get their friends into it. So that would be my only response, just as a quick one.
I have to say, the last 4 weeks, like it felt like a lot, like stuff was happening all the time. Yeah, like I would say like 2 months, maybe 3 months, and having small updates that keep people coming back all the time. It really depends on the time span when the meta goes from like everything is new and you experiment to when it gets stale. And I think the problem with where lots of people left was when it was only blue jump and it was I couldn't play it myself anymore because it was 2-3 months just the same, and you hate losing to the turn 2 Aurora Prophet of Tides trade. Like at that point when everything is figured out and it only comes down to like who has the nuts, it can get maybe tilting and people might leave for those reasons. And to grow it actually, like you have to consider Farah is like made by a small developer team, and it's very hard with so many other games being around, even though I think it's the best card game, to get the attention of players. Like they would need to make much more advertising probably. It's just super hard, I think, and yeah, that's why like people like Cappu and I are trying to produce content and also help out the game, and yeah.
All right, to keep it brief, if you guys just have like a couple words, you know, is it just updates you guys want to see, or is there something else that you think could increase the player base? But keeping it brief.
It needs to increase PR. That's one of the main things. I was at Gamescom. I tried to teach people the game. No one knew Feria. No one even knew what it was. I mean, it's a problem with the younger generation. I feel like a lot of people, especially younger ones, don't have as much patience to get into such a slow-paced game as Feria. So there's automatically a smaller base of players that are even willing to take the step and take their time to get into the game. So that's
maybe
also something to consider.
Address the target audience a bit more.
Yeah.
But that's also hard to find. But yeah, one thing I really wanted to say, I wish the community events would be a bit more supported. Like the Meta Shaker contest. Like I would love to see, or there was also the Garrodon tournament that is no longer. Just to make people participate more in those community events, maybe increase the prizes in terms of like there's gold prizes you can win, but it would be maybe much more of an incentive if you could win like 3 or 4 times as much. Maybe not that much, but yeah, would be nice to have some price increases.
All right, and then Zaldin.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with most of this stuff. I wrote an article called "The Future of Feria" on the Hub quite a while ago, and that's probably that encapsulates what I have to say on the topic. But so if you want to go look at that up, that would be more details. But I basically agree with what you guys are saying.
All right, and then S, do you have anything to bring?
Yeah, just what Lou said about the community events. I think that the Feria player base is really nice, and everyone wants to contribute and add to the experience, and just allowing that to grow and just increase maybe the support for these events and creating more events. It would be just a more enjoyable experience overall, and maybe it can keep players stick around.
Yep. Okay. I didn't see any standout questions other than the one we touched on now. So we'll go ahead and close it out now. So I'll go one by one through each of you guys, and you can say how to find you, whether it's through Twitch, YouTube, and then yeah, you guys have links that you want attached to this this podcast for YouTube. I'll go ahead and link that. So Zaldin's post, I'll go ahead and link that as well. But Zaldin, where can they find you?
Yeah, the best place is the Turn 4 Feria Discord, which I'll put in the thing in a minute here. That's where I hang out and spend most of my time. Yep, you can find me there.
All right, Nulu?
Where you can find me?
Yeah.
Lou90 everywhere. Twitter, Twitch, YouTube. I also have a Discord channel if you want to join that.
All right, and then ESofDawn, do you stream at all?
You should.
Yeah.
I think he's AFK again. But...
Oh, he might be muted again, yeah.
Yeah.
Alright, I'll skip over him for now. Superblizurd, you stream. Go ahead and let people know where to follow you at.
Yeah. I stream at Superblizurd, that's with a U though.
Oh, did I spell it wrong?
No, it's Lizard, not Lizard.
Yeah.
Because that was already
Lizard,
taken.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, it's the same with Salugi. His name on Twitch is also super weird, like Salugi with 3 O's.
Yeah.
Anyways, you can find me there or in the Ferrier Discord.
Yeah, and guys,
And
if you're on this
to
channel,
answer your
oh, yep.
question, Lou, to answer your question, Lou, I don't know. I haven't like streamed much before, but maybe when I fix my camera and stuff, I can stream a bit. Maybe you can help me with that. I don't know, to get started, but
Yeah.
it sounds
please
nice. Yeah.
stream.
You don't even need a camera. Like people really enjoy watching like high level Ferrier. I think that's like if you're one of the top 50 or top 100 gold rank players, like people will definitely enjoy that. Like there's not always a streamer online, so they will just most of the time jump to you. So
yeah, if you give me a chance to watch what the previous monthly cup winner is playing, I'm gonna be watching. If you stream, I'm gonna be a dedicated watcher.
Can I
Certainly.
just say as a final note on that, it's actually really important for the community that we have overlap of streamers. We've had a number of people do it and then take a break, but it's really useful to be able to just push it on to the next person and keep the community. We don't want everyone to stay up and be zombies, but you get an interesting collection of people doing it. So ESofDawn, that would be useful to just pile people on for that reason.
That's a very good point you bring that up. And like I try to like time my streams around when Aqua is done. But also one other card game, Elder Scrolls Legends, they've added these. It's kind of artificial, but they've added these drops. So when you watch, you get some in-game currency or stuff. So if they could somehow add a mechanic, I know they have it with the egg bot or whatever it's called, but if they could add something like that, would maybe would maybe incentivize or what? How do you call it?
They did it. Yeah, incentivize watching. They did it for stream, right?
Stream and watch.
They had their Krog's wheel that they gave a prize just for watching. Every once in a while there'd be a raffle.
But maybe we could reach out to the devs and ask them, because like I know one guy, he was streaming Elder Scrolls Legend for like 100 or 200 people, and he's like 1,000, 2,000 viewers all the time. And I think that would not only draw viewers, but also raise lots of interest in streamers who maybe want to grow, and could maybe get them dedicated, because other people pay their streamers to present the game, and I think that would be maybe good for the growth of the community.
Yeah, I think that's a great note to end on. Maybe something the devs should consider. And let's go ahead and close it out here. I wanted to keep it roughly around 2 hours, and only a little bit overstretched. I understand now why Stream doing the Kappa councils always had it go over time. Definitely a lot you want to squeeze in at the end. But that's it, guys. Thank you so much for watching this episode of Cappu Council, and I'll see you guys next episode or in a future stream. So thanks for watching, guys, and we'll see you next time.
See ya.
See ya.
Yeah.